Hello everybody, I'm hoping this is working okay. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Let me just get this up. As you might be able to tell by the format of this video, today's video is going to operate a little bit differently. Well, it's not video, it's a stream. I'm just used to saying video. But yeah, today's stream is going to operate differently to what I normally do. But I thought that with Series 12 coming to a close, I felt that it would be the perfect time to get my full thoughts about not only the show itself, but the entire franchise as a whole. Now, inevitably, with things like this, you're not going to agree with everything I have to say. There are going to be some things that may annoy some people, but that's the nature of opinions, if you like. So, yeah, I'm aware that there was some title issues earlier on, but they should be fixed now. So, yeah, hello everyone in chat. Let me just see who we've got in here. I'm using my phone as the chat thing because I can only see the picture that yeah. Oh yeah, that's Cynical Who. This is something I wanted to do before the thing that you asked me about, by the way. The show has been canon. Yeah. I understand that completely. But yeah, apologies, Cynical Who. This is just something I wanted to do for a while. Who else have we got in the chat? We got Crag, Doctor 14 Blu-ray reviews, Cynical Who, Zita Girl. Okay, so this is something I've wanted to do for a little while. I just wanted to just get all of my thoughts into one thing, and I thought doing it live would be a good way of getting you guys involved, because there will be basically the way this is going to work is I'm going to go through all of my issues with the franchise, and I'm going to basically detail them all, and then afterwards there'll be a Q&A where you guys can tell me your thoughts, tell me if anything you agree with or disagree with, whatever. So with that said, I'm going to make a start. If we've got 20 people in already, which is pretty great to see. If you guys could again share this round. Evening Problem being, evening Afro Pro 52. Bad Wolf 66, a lot of familiar faces, which is nice. But yeah, with that said, let's get into it, I guess. So the first thing, obviously the show itself, that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about. But the first actual thing I wanted to cover, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what it's going to be. It is the cast. Now, the cast obviously are not the main fault, I will say. The main fault will come shortly. However, they are the faces of this show at the moment. Therefore, it makes sense to basically talk about them first. So with that said, we'll start with the cast. So, starting with Jodie Whittaker, right. It's always difficult to talk about Jodie Whittaker because I know I end up annoying a lot of people with my takes on Jodie Whittaker, but she cannot, in my personal opinion, and you guys feel free to disagree with me on this, she cannot carry a series as the main character. Now, people were telling me for the longest time, Tharis, she might not be great in Doctor Who, but she's good in other things. So I went and looked at some of her other things one day. I didn't watch full episodes of what she was in, admittedly, but I did watch Attack the Block that she was in with John Boyega, who, funnily enough, made it into Star Wars. It's funny how these things sort of circle back round. And I watched a few scenes of her in Broadchurch as well. And something I noticed in the two things that I watched, in Attack the Block, she's doing the same accent and a very similar character to what she does in the actual Doctor Who TV show. She's kind of playing this doctor character who is assisting the group of boys who are the main characters of this show. She's very similar, and in that she is also very, very sort of one note. There's not a lot of, what's the word, I guess, variety or range, I guess is a better word, in her performance. It's all very one note and very sort of generic, I suppose. And then I watched some clips of her in Broadchurch as well, And the funny thing is, in Broadchurch, is she's trying to do a different accent, but you can tell that she's struggling because there are certain points in her performance where you can hear the accent slipping. And I mean that in the sense that she's supposed to be doing this sort of, I believe, from what I could make out, it was more of an upper class woman sort of posh accent, if you like. But you can hear her Yorkshireness, I guess, coming out in that performance. And having seen that, I can basically confirm that Jodie Whittaker cannot do accents, judging by that as well. And the thing about it is that I wouldn't mind so much if her accent fitted her character. Her accent doesn't, though. Christopher Eccleston's accent, you could argue, fitted his character. It was a rougher accent. It was a more urban accent, shall we say, which fitted a more rough around the edges, depressed doctor in a way, with the whole post-Time War trauma thing that they had going on at the start of the Russell T Davies era. This doctor doesn't really have that. You add on the fact that Jodie Whittaker's accent is, how do I put this nicely without offending a bunch of people in Yorkshire? It's a very acquired taste in that way. Some people are fine listening to it, others are not. And I'm one of those people who finds her accent incredibly grating, I guess is the word that I would use. And I think that having that be the main sort of voice that you hear in the show is immediately a bit of a turn off for people like me who don't find her accent all that nice to listen to, really. In terms of the rest of her performance, though, again, it's very generic. There's not a lot you can take from it. She's basically, you can tell that David Tennant was a massive inspiration, which, hey, taking inspiration from one of the most popular doctors ever on paper isn't a bad idea. The problem is that it's kind of, the writing is kind of the issue with this as well, but she doesn't do anything herself. She doesn't put in any of the work to make her doctor more interesting to watch. Her movements are very kind of generic. There isn't a lot of extravagant way of moving. Matt Smith, for example. I'm going to use him as a random example because I'm literally looking at a giant poster of him on my wall as I'm doing this live stream. Matt Smith, for example, had a very particular way of moving around a scene. He clapped his hands together, he flapped them about, he turned on his heels. He, whether you like him or not, he had a very specific and particular way of moving. Christopher Eccleston, another great example, had a great way of moving. He was very sort of, he strut along like he was sort of this massively, like, this guy with a chip on his shoulder is the best way I could put it. You could tell that he had unfinished business and that he wasn't going to take anything from anybody. Jodie is basically just doing the generic doctor actions in that way. There's no sort of flamboyant way that she moves. Even Capaldi, when he's doing speeches, the way he moves his hands and the way he expresses himself visually is just a joy to watch. Whereas this, you get nothing from it. There's none of the depth, none of the nuance there. And bear in mind, we're only on the first slide. I've got a lot to say about this era, but I wanted to get it all out into one sort of stream for you guys. But yeah, there's just nothing about her character that's either unique or all that enjoyable, for me at least. If you guys enjoy it, that's great. I'm happy for you, but personally for me, there's not a lot here. It's just kind of substanceless, and I think the fact that she couldn't do an English accent for it just goes to prove that I think she was miscast. I think that she is a little bit over her head, if I'm being honest. I don't think that she's cut out to be the lead of the show. Joe Martin, in 20 minutes, in my opinion, had far more screen presence than Jodie Whittaker has had in an entire 2-series run at this point. And I think that's indicative of how wrong a choice she was. And I think it is also indicative of the fact that I'm more and more thinking that she got in because she was Chibnall's friend. And personally for me, that's not not a good sign if the main showrunner is casting their friends. For example, like Stephen Moffat wasn't like a friend of Peter Capaldi's, he was just an admirer of his work. He was that, good that he said, we've got to get Peter Capaldi as the Doctor at some point because he's just so fantastic of an actor. Someone in the comments I've just read there said Joe Martin should have been the 13th Doctor. Agreed. In my opinion, if they'd have started out with Joe Martin as the 13th Doctor, the backlash to a female Doctor would have been a lot less than what it turned out to be. That is my opinion, and if you guys disagree on that, please feel free to say so. I just personally think that she was horribly miscast, and there is a part of me that feels sorry because she has basically been thrown into the deep end in terms of this character. She's playing a role that she's not really cut out for, in my honest opinion. This is not an attack on Jodie, by the way. I'd like to say that. This is not a personal attack or anything like that. This is just my opinion on her performance. And that if you disagree, again, feel free to say so. But moving on to the next character, I'm going to talk about Ryan next. Because Ryan, to me, kind of similarly to Jodie, has no presence. He literally has no presence. And unlike Jodie, I would argue his character is probably one of the most developed out of this current TARDIS team. He's kind of got the most plot elements going for him. I mean that in the sense that he's got his dyspraxia, he's got his relationship with Graham, he's got the backstory with his nan, he's got development. And yet still, he's just a complete non-presence for me. And he delivers his lines all exactly the same. Exactly the same. And he sticks out in a lot of episodes. He sticks out like a sore thumb. Because you've got Jodie, who I think is trying her best, but it's very clear that it's not enough. You've got Graham, obviously Bradley Walsh, who is always entertaining and funny, and it makes it seem effortless. And you've got Mandy Gill, who, in Series 12 in particular, had been given a lot more attention, at least by the scripts. And I think that Ryan is probably the weakest element of this TARDIS for me now. Yeah, it used to be Yaz, I will say, but Ryan's certainly up there, to be sure. I've made fun of his line delivery a lot before, the whole, I got chips though, and all that. It's so one note. He sounds the same no matter what he's saying. Whether he's upset, he sounds the same. If he's sad, he sounds the same. If he's happy, he sounds the same. If he's excited, it sounds exactly the same. Whatever he is doing, whatever he is saying, he always sounds exactly the same to me. And I think that is a big problem in a dynamic where you've got 4 people. In an ideal world, a TARDIS team with 4, each character would have their own thing to bring to the table. I personally don't think that 4 character TARDIS teams are a good idea, or at least they're not a good idea if you introduce them all at the same time, including the new Doctor. What should have happened, in my opinion, is that Graham and Ryan should have joined the TARDIS in Series 11. And maybe Yaz should have joined in Series 12. And the reason I say that is basically, because of the fact that way, Graham and Ryan would have had a series to themselves to get all the development that they needed. And then you bring Yaz in, and she'd get a lot more development. And it would feel as if everyone had had their time in the spotlight, so to speak. But throughout these 2 series, it's been juggled between the 3 of them. And I think that Ryan is the person who suffered the most from that. Well, I guess the Doctors suffered the most, but in terms of companions, it's Ryan who I find has suffered the most. Right, Mandeep Gill, Yasmin Khan. Yasmin Khan is a tricky one, because she went from the worst part about the TARDIS team to one of the better parts. I still find her incredibly annoying in some scenes, and I still think that her day job and her home life should be brought up a lot more. than they have been. Because if you think about it, I'd argue that Can You Hear Me was the main point where we actually saw any of these companions, like what they actually think and feel, and that's 2 series in, so that's not really a great selling point if you've had to wait 2 series to try and get some development for your characters. But yeah, Yaz is like, to me at least, Yaz is emblematic of the fact that she kind of suffers from the same thing Ryan does. The difference though is that in series 12 she's been given a lot more focus, which I do think was the right call. However, I'm gonna be straight up honest with you, like, the only thing, well, like, Yaz, it's difficult. Mandy Gill conveys emotion probably better than Ryan does, so I'll say that, but she is way too much, she's way too good in that way. She's way too perfect. She's kind of the perfect companion. She's the one who's always charging into danger, always deflating the situations, always the one to have the Doctor's back no matter what. And I just hope that in series 13 or the special or whatever it is, she gets her comeuppance for that. Because I think just having her be this perfect sort of figure that can never seem to do anything wrong, I think that kind of goes for most of them. But I think her in particular, she's basically the second Doctor of this group, and I don't think it works. But again, that's just me personally. Sorry if you hear any background noise. Obviously, I'm right next to the kitchen, so inevitably there might be some sort of background stuff, but I have tried to minimize it as much as humanly possible, of course. But yeah, so Mandy Gill, like, her police life doesn't get brought up nearly as often enough. It should be brought up a lot more, because obviously there could be some really interesting, conflict between the Doctor and Yaz, both being figures of authority, both having different sort of moral codes, but no, instead she's kind of just there to stroke the Doctor's ego constantly, and it doesn't work for me. And then you've got Graham. Now, Bradley Walsh, I'm of the personal opinion, is good in pretty much anything that he's in, quite frankly. I don't really think that he gives a bad performance throughout this series. The problem, though, is that his character could have left at the end of Series 11. And as I said in one of my previous videos, it's not that I wanted him to leave, it's just that the writers clearly didn't have anything else for him to do going forward. And I mean that in the sense that he had this whole arc with Grace and getting over her and becoming Ryan's grandfather in Series 11, which was good stuff. Obviously nothing groundbreaking, nothing really that good, but it was better than what most of the characters in this TARDIS team got. Comes Series 12 though, and focus shifts to, well, Yaz pretty much, if I'm being honest, companion-wise. And all Graham was left to do was do the comic relief lines. And don't get me wrong, he's made me chuckle a couple of times throughout the series. However, I can't help but feel that Graham's character, and obviously Bradley Walsh by extension, has just kind of become a caricature of what Graham was in Series 11. In Series 11, Graham felt like a character. In Series 12, in Series 11, Graham felt like a person. In Series 12, Graham felt like a character. And the problem is that even though these are characters in a TV show, we're all aware of that, it shouldn't feel as though they are. If you get what I'm trying to say, they should feel like real people. Graham did Series 11. He doesn't in Series 12. I'd argue the closest we get is, again, Can You Hear Me? Which is why it's my favourite episode of the series, which isn't really saying much, but yeah. Because we actually see Graham open up about his cancer, saying, Doc, I might not have long left. What do I do? And then obviously the Doctor just brushes it off like it's nothing. Oh, that scene still gets to me. Still gets to me to this day. I know people have defended it. I just can't get behind it, though. I'm afraid. I can't get behind it. But yeah, in total, we've got a lead who is incapable of carrying scenes on her own, which could be why the side casts are always so big, is to kind of hide the fact that Jodie Whittaker isn't a very strong presence on her own. And even in the finale, she's mostly sleeping throughout the episode. You've got Ryan, who is essentially just a guy. You've got Yaz, who's there to stroke the Doctor's ego, and you've got Graham, who's there for comic relief. You know that scene in World Enough in Time where Missy's like, oh, you've got exposition and comic relief. That's even more evident through this series, even more so than it was in that series. And I thought that was quite clear in the previous series, in Series 10. I thought, a lot of the characters were just sort of there for either simple exposition, comic relief. With this, it feels even like it's like a level further down, where it's like, I have no attachment to these people. I still don't understand what their dynamic is. They say they're a fam, but there's no sort of family connection there to me. What is it about them that feels like a family? Genuinely. There's no family bond there at all. If Jodie acted like a mother figure, then I could kind of see it. But she doesn't. It's just kind of the weird space uncle, I guess. If, anything. And, yeah, I just don't get what these guys' dynamic is supposed to be. The closest to an actual human dynamic is probably Graham and Ryan. Because, father and grandson, grandfather and grandson is obviously a real-life dynamic that exists. And is obviously capitalised upon in Series 11 in particular. The rest of them, I don't know, they just seem to have no real chemistry, to be honest. And I think maybe it's partly because it's not developed enough. Partly because they just don't know what to do with the other characters. But then that begs the question, why have a 4-character TARDIS team to begin with? It's just... I just don't like the cast, except for Bradley, really. None of them ever leave any impression on me at all. There was one guy in Series 11 who made a joke that Yaz could basically be a ghost. And yeah, it's true. And yeah. So in total, the Doctor annoys me and basically steals all the things that I wasn't a huge fan of in the 10th Doctor and amplifies them to 11. You've got Ryan, who's basically just a guy who delivers everything exactly the same. You've got Yaz, who's basically just there to stroke the Doctor's ego, and you've got Bradley, who's there to be the comic relief. That's it. And I just don't think the cast is great, except for Bradley Walsh. Moving on then to the writing. Now, of course, this is probably where I'm going to go most in depth with my thoughts, really. The writing for this series, I'm just going to come out and say it, has been, for both series, for the Chibnall era as a whole. I keep saying series. What I mean by series is the Chibnall era as a collective whole. So series 11 and 12, plus Resolution and whatever else. Overall, the best we ever get, writing-wise, is basically meh RTD episodes or meh Moffat episodes. It never reaches what Doctor Who can be, unfortunately. That's as high as it ever reaches. And it's sad that our standards have lowered so much that we consider what we consider to be meh RTD or Moffat as fantastic episodes. I was happy with Can You Hear Me? But in any other series of the show, it would have basically just been meh. Whereas in series 12, it's oh my god, an episode with an actual decent sci-fi premise. What is this? What universe am I living in? Anyway, I personally think Chris Chibnall he's not ambitious enough to run a sci-fi show. He's good at things that are simple. Things like Born and Bred and Broadchurch, things that appeal to masses, but don't really appeal to sci-fi fans, realistically. Oh, I just seen a super chat from Problem being, Joe Martin will be a reboot and erase male doctors. Obviously it's suggested in the Timeless Child arc that she is pre-Hartnell, which is something I don't like. I do think, though, if they'd have gone with her as, like, 13, it would have been a lot better. That is certainly the implication, though. Thank you for the super chat as well, probably. But yeah, Chibnall is good at writing simple things that apply to, that appeal to masses, but he is not good at writing detailed, complex sci-fi stories. He's not. I love how, for the Series 12 marketing, like, they were hyping up this big revelation that no one saw coming. And in the end, it was just the Timeless Child's the Doctor. How many times in sci-fi do we get the main character has a mysterious past? Ooh. That's going to be revealed in the finale or at the end of the film or whatever it is. It's not original by any standards. It's just kind of the most generic sci-fi paint by numbers that you could probably get. It's nothing interesting or entertaining, and we should have seen this coming realistically. Oh well, some did, with obviously his previous Doctor Who efforts. The only one of those I could really say I enjoyed was the Silurian two-parter, and I think that's more, looking back on it, due to childhood nostalgia, because I remember having a double pack with Amy's Choice and that Silurian two-parter. So, in terms of writing, we should have probably seen that he's not good at writing interesting sci-fi concepts. He's just not. The most interesting sci-fi thing that we've had is, again, Can You Hear Me? And he didn't even write that one. In terms of things Chris Chibnall wrote, I guess... God, that's difficult. What's actually good that Chris Chibnall wrote? I guess, like, Ascension felt sci-fi-ish, but none of it that was really in it paid off. So in that case, it's like, well, you did half of a thing, I guess. Yeah, the writing for this series overall, and not to pick on Chibnall too much, like the writing just in general has been pretty abysmal. Like, I still don't think they know who their characters are, what their motivations are, and what their end game is with this era. Realistically, what is the goal? What is the aim with this? Like, I still don't know. At the moment, it appears to be replicate Moffat and RTD, but I'm going to get onto that more in a future segment. I think that covers about everything I want to say in the writing segment, at least. The only things that stick out, ironically, are the things that that aren't written by the showrunner, and that's unfortunate considering that I think in Series 11 he wrote, I want to say about 5 of the episodes, and in Series 12 I think it was less, but it was still quite a few. So yeah, not great. And the other writers just haven't been much cop either. Like, Pete McTeague was pretty good for Kablam, but then he wrote Praxeus, and Praxeus was just, ugh. It was just so boring and dull. And that's basically how you could describe most of the episodes of this era. They're just boring, dull fluff that isn't realistically very interesting in the slightest. But I'm going to move on to the next segment, because I could sit here discussing writing all night, and I've got other things that I want to talk about in this stream. So I'm going to move on. Next up we have the politics, kind of. Now, the reason I said kind of... Shut up, Alexa. The reason I said kind of is because there is nothing inherently wrong with covering political topics in media. The reality is that you could make an argument that everything is political. The issue with this era is that it fails to apply its political ideas into a good sci-fi script. And I can see some people in the chat there saying, yeah. I debated whether to actually put this one on the PowerPoint when I was making it, But I decided, nah, you know what? That I need to say this. I need to say it because I know I'm probably going to get a bunch of dislikes for this part in particular, but I need to talk about this. The politics of this, like, there's nothing inherently wrong with having political stories. Like, let's just face facts. Everything is inherently political, especially now when we live in such a hyperbolic political climate. However, there is a certain way to do it that not only makes it entertaining, but also makes the audience more receptive towards it. And I think the only example that there's a lot of examples in pre-Chibnall Doctor Who. I think some great examples include Remembrance of the Daleks, obviously covering race, Genesis of the Daleks, which covers, obviously, just sort of just being a Nazi in general. Basically most Dalek stories cover that. You've got things like, what else have we got? Bunch of different stories. Got Green Death, which covers environmentalism. You've got so many different stories that cover things. Vengeance on Varos covers corrupt governments and video nasties. There's a bunch of political concepts in Doctor Who if you go back far enough. The thing is with them though is that they're handled well, and they're not just unoriginal, boring, and safe. Now, the example I've used is for the PowerPoint was the Trump guy from Arachnids in the UK, and the reason I put him on here is because he's probably the worst example of politics in the Chibnall era. He was basically just there to say, "Hey, isn't Trump bad?" and didn't really say anything more interesting than that. He only said what audience members are already told on a daily basis anyway, rather than actually saying anything interesting. And I think that that's kind of the main issue with him. If they'd have gone about it in such a way that you had this alien planet, right, where there's this corrupt leader and there's another species on the other side of the planet, and he wants to put a border up between the two species. Maybe you could do something interesting with that. This is a stream ad, Zinko. It's live. But yeah, if you wanted to do something interesting, you probably could with kind of a Trump-esque character. But they didn't. They went for the sort of safest, most boring route they could have gone with. He's a hotel owner who's also running for president. He's Trump. And it's the best way of doing it is, the best way to describe the guy in this episode is to look at the Chibs video from Flower Productions, where it's like, we thought we'd have the hotel owner, who'd be the real villain, as a thing for capitalist businessman. And that's basically what he is. That's all he represents, is just capitalism personified, essentially. And he is probably the worst example of politics. However, he's not the only example of bad politics in the Chibnall era. Oh, no. We've got a couple more to go through. So you've got also the Witchfinders. Now, the Witchfinders is basically just, hey, didn't women have it bad in the 1600s? It's like, yes, of course they did. But it doesn't really add anything to the conversation. It just regurgitates talking points that we've all already heard. And the issue with it, as I said, is that it adds nothing new to the conversation at all. It basically just gives the audience a kind of basic lecture. It's kind of like teaching primary school children about this stuff. It says what needs to be said, but it doesn't say anything beyond that. It's got no profound message, nothing interesting to say at all. And it's unfortunate because really interesting stuff can be done with it. A great example is, if any of you guys ever listened to the Davros audio, he basically takes over this giant conglomerate company and decides to turn it into one big war machine basically treating everyone below him like servants. It's a great story, and it's like probably like one of my favorite Big Finish so far. And in the story, it basically shows the sort of the issues with not only capitalism as a concept, but also with the ideas of war and how realistically they only end in more suffering than they sort of try and fix. And it's really interesting, but with this, there's just nothing to it. You've got as we said, right into the UK with the Trump guy. You've got Witchfinders that just says, "Hey, women had it bad." You've got Rosa that arguably was one of the better ones. I still don't think it handled it very well. It was still very blatant. I think, again, wrapping it into a more subtle sci-fi concept. Basically, what I'm asking for is a story like the Ood two-parter in Series 4. I can't remember what it's called, so you'll have to forgive me on that. But it basically talks about how humans use slaves. And obviously they enslave Ood kind in the story. And there's a line exchange where the Doctor goes, "It's not that different from your time." It's like, and Donna's horrified. She's like, "What do you mean? I haven't got sleeves." And then he's like, "Well, who do you think made your clothes?" Now, that is really interesting, and it does it with a great sci-fi concept. Most of this does not. It doesn't do it with an interesting sci-fi concept. It just kind of says what we already know. And it just doesn't work. You could argue that Praxius tries to incorporate it into a sci-fi concept, but the sci-fi concept is so naff that it's barely worth even adding. And then you've got Orphan 55, which literally has 5 minutes of talking the planet of the youth. Thank you, James R.A. Woodwright. Thank you very much. I'm terrible with names, so you'll have to forgive me on that. But someone said there, Planet of the Youth is how you do political messaging. I agree. That's how it should be done. And I think that people need to learn from that story and others like it. To me, personally. But with this, it's just like, it's not interesting. It's not done well. If anything, it's just blatant and obvious, and most people aren't learning anything from it. Turn Left also had a scene where people were being sent to concentration camps. Yeah, but it wasn't the focus, and it wasn't done in such a blatant way. You just have a scene where Donna's like, "Where are they going? Where are they going?" He's like, "Oh, camps, that's what they said last time," and Wolf's like tearing up. That is what you want. That not only gets a message across, but is also heartbreaking because you've spent so much time with these characters that you feel terrible when this happens. And it's horrible, but obviously it's the sad fact of what happened with concentration camps. With this, though, as I said, there's just nothing. And you got Orphan 55, as I said, that they literally have a 5-minute monologue about how climate change is bad. And it's like, where's the subtlety? Where is the nuance, I guess is what I'm saying. There is no nuance with this. It's just saying what we already know. It's basically just reading Wikipedia articles on the subject, which is kind of true for the pure historicals as well. It's basically just Jodie spouting a Wikipedia article on each famous figure. And, yeah, politics. The politics aren't the issue. It's the way that they're being written and handled is the issue. For me, at least. Moving on, because I think I need a break from talking about politics after I just did a whole sort of rant about it. The music. Now, this is admittedly a smaller issue, but I think that it speaks volumes about the show right now. I would argue that without Murray Gold in the early show, the show wouldn't have risen to such a level of popularity that it did, in my opinion. I think that Murray Gold was a big part of the show's success in the early 2000s. I think that he added such a layer of depth to all the episodes that he worked on that it elevated them beyond just good TV. It elevated them to fantastic TV. So a couple of years later, to hear this essentially background music. Like, do you know what it reminds me of? Do you know when you have those relaxing, calming music 10-hour videos on YouTube? That's basically all of Sega Nakanola's music. It all just fades into the background, um, and doesn't add anything to the experience whatsoever. Yes, this is live last time, but to me at least. Someone said there that Bolstrak says he's just humming the keys. As much as I've had my issues with Bolstrak, I agree with that. He is basically just pressing buttons to see what works. At least that's how it sounds. And yeah, it's just there's nothing memorable about it. Some people have praised Sega Nakanola's music, and maybe it's personal taste, but for me, I don't even notice it. Someone just said it there. I don't notice it. I literally don't. People have said in tweets like, "Oh, I really like Sega Nakanola's score," and it's like, really? I didn't even know it was there. That's genuinely how I feel about the music, and admittedly, it is a small thing, but I think it's with this era in particular, it's the small things that make the biggest difference, and this is one of those things that made a massive difference. And someone's mentioned there the nitpicks line about the Tim Shaw music sounding like a reverb fart. I agree. The problem with it as well is just, I just kind of lost my train of thought then. Yeah, it's just nothing original or inspiring about it. It just kind of exists, and I don't think the ambient style of music works for a show like Doctor Who, especially when you've got big action scenes. And like, there are moments in the series where I'm expecting certain themes to play. I'm like waiting for them to start from Murray Gold, but they never happen. They never ever happen, and it's really disappointing. For example, whenever a Cyberman turned up in Series 5, I was waiting for the but it never arrived. Or when the Daleks appeared in Resolution, I was waiting for the demonic choir, I can't even replicate it. How does it go? Hang on, this sort of. I can't even. Yeah, I'm not even going to try and replicate it, but you get my point. I was waiting for the certain music cues. The horizontal. That stuff. I can't sing for Toffee, but you get what I'm trying to say. They didn't come, and it felt like an element of the show's soul had been stripped away. I understand that's a melodramatic statement, but it's true. It feels like there's a part missing from the show that should be there, but it's not. Anyway, moving onwards. The look. Now, again, this is a nitpicky thing. When I say the look, I basically mean the set design, the costumes, anything that your eyeballs look at. I nearly said balls then, that could have had some strange connotations, but yeah, anything that your eyeballs look at, that's what I'm talking about here. And I've used the TARDIS console because I honestly think it's the biggest eyesore of the series. And yeah, it still hasn't grown on me. I'll admit the corridors do add a slight extra layer of depth, I suppose, but beyond that, it's just kind of... ugh. I don't like it. I do not like it in the slightest. But I mean, if you like it, I guess, it's fine. It's just, to me, it's still just a dark cave. Not much else, and I think that's kind of sad that we went from arguably one of the best TARDIS designs to this, and it's just a massive step down in every regard. Same with the Doctor's costume. It is just basically the most generic Doctor costume that you could probably conjure up in your mind. That is the costume. And the biggest issue with these sets and these costumes is that they don't say anything about the Doctor's character. I would also like to point out that on the topic of look, there are so many lens flares in this series, Series 12 in particular, that you'd think that J.J. Abrams made it. It's just, I just don't like the look of it. It's a nitpicky thing, but it's true. I just don't like how it looks. And there are other parts of Who that I don't really like how they look. I'm of the opinion that the sort of later Moffat years didn't look great. Not sort of necessarily later Matt Smith years, I should say, with the sort of sterile TARDIS. I'm aware that they use the same TARDIS prop, but it has so much more life and energy put into it when you add the books and you add the different colour, light time rotor. But with this, it's just like, no, there's nothing about the design of anything that I like, except maybe the Cybermen, and even they were used for like 20 minutes at best. And I even think some parts of those could be removed. I think that having the spikes on the chest pieces would have been a nice addition, but having them all over the Cybermen was a bad idea. Someone's just said it's the writing. I agree, it is mostly the writing, but I've just basically been going through each different thing. If you rewind the live stream far back enough, I do talk about the writing as well. So, yeah. It just doesn't look good. The colour grading, particularly for Series 11, was pretty bad. It's improved for Series 12, but only marginally. It just doesn't look good, and I think that's one of the things that is going to put off new audiences in a way. If it doesn't look good, people aren't going to watch it. Simple as that. It's kind of the same reason that a lot of people are put off from watching Classic Who. Sad as it is to say, I love Classic Who, but there are a lot of people that will not watch it because it looks like garbage. And I think in years to come, people will feel the same way about this. They'll feel the same way about this. They won't appreciate the sort of style of this, I don't think. It won't age well, is what I'm trying to say. And I just don't think the look overall, it looks very good in terms of costumes or set design or really anything looks that good. Especially considering the apparent large budget increase. I don't really know where a lot of it goes. There are some shots that look kind of decent. That one shot in Timeless Children where they're rebuilding Gallifrey, that looks quite good. But aside from that, aside from little moments, it just doesn't look good. It's kind of a bit of an eyesore. And that's just my opinion on that. But moving on, obviously, this is kind of still a relatively small thing. I think the next thing is the biggest thing. Yeah. The biggest thing that I believe is wrong with the Chibnall era as a whole is that it has no identity. With each showrunner, particularly for Modern Who, and to a lesser extent Classic Who, you kind of knew what each showrunner did with the show. With, sort of, if you want to go all the way back, 60s Who. It's kind of the Twilight Zone era Doctor Who. With 70s Who, it's Bond era Who. By 70s, I mean Pertwee. By Baker Who, and Hinchcliffe Who, it's more sort of horror inspired. And then if you go to the modern series, it's kind of a mysterious sci-fi romance show. And then in the Moffat era, it's more of a complex weaving narrative space show. But what is it? What is Chibnall's hook, I guess? What is his USP, his unique selling point for this era of the show? I don't honestly think that there is one. And I think that's one of my biggest issues, is that if you ask someone to say, so what is the defining, the defining trait, the defining characteristics of the Chibnall era? And I don't think there are any. It's just kind of, I don't think this era of the show knows what it wants to be for the most part. Especially Series 12, I noticed it more. Series 11, for all the issues I had with it, at least did its own thing. Series 12 just doesn't know what it wants to be. There are some episodes, like Nikola Tesla, that feel very RTD in that way. They feel very sort of campy and silly, but in not campy is the wrong word, cheesy, kind of like an RTD episode, with a sort of cheesy villain, but a setting and a sort of alien premise that ties into history in some way. That's a very RTD thing. But then you've got episodes like Fugitive that have these big overarching arcs that are introduced that feel very much like Moffat episodes. I just don't think that it knows what it wants to be at most points. And I think that that's one of the biggest issues, is that I don't think it knows what it wants. It's just kind of... It's an identity crisis, is what I'd say it is. It's the show with an identity crisis. I think that if they could really nail down what the show wants to be, I think that would be one of the... Well, that would be the biggest issue for me, at least, solved. If it had an identity, I think it would be a lot better. But it doesn't as of right now. It's kind of just there, and it kind of just exists. Yeah, it's just not good. And it's not memorable in the least. And I don't think that this era will look back on and say, yeah, remember that unique thing for the Chibnall era? Because there isn't any. It's just the same. And I think that's just kind of sad that it's all feels exactly like the same as before. It's not really original in any way. I think Jodie is sort of the best microcosmic example of that. Her character feels like a Tennant knockoff. She does. You even have the whole what thing, like I mentioned earlier. It's just not original in the slightest. It's almost as if Chris Chibnall looked at what the other showrunners done, see what was positively received, and try and inject it into his series after Series 11 was a bit of a failure. This is a stream, Cyber Doctor 1918. Yeah, just overall, just no identity, and I think that that's kind of the biggest problem. You can't really market something that has no identity, which is why the marketing has been so poor, in my opinion. But yeah, moving onwards again. Stuff outside of the show. Now, this is obviously the stuff that surrounds the show. Stuff that's not controlled directly, at least, by the people who write and star in the show, etc. We've got the fan base. Yep, this one was kind of inevitable. The reason I've used that name there is that I think it does do a pretty good job of explaining the fan base right now. So you've got toxic anti-feminists and toxic feminists battling it out, kind of keeping each other in the middle there. And then you've just got casual fans and viewing figures just running away, because they don't know where to stand. And for the longest time, I haven't known where I stand, which is why I made this video, was just kind of just to say my whole thoughts. I think at the start I felt very annoyed by the show's politics. As time has gone on, I've been less annoyed by them, but I've been more annoyed about how they've executed them. And it's come to obviously this, where you cannot, and I repeat, you cannot have an opinion about this current era on Twitter or YouTube or bloody anywhere without someone calling you something. And it's ridiculous. On both sides of the argument, by the way. It's ridiculous. If you say you love the show, you're a soy boy. If you say you hate the show, you're a bigot. There is no in between, and it's ridiculous. And I will say that it's not your fault that you disagree with somebody. But if you directly attack someone for their opinion, then that is your fault. And you should be held responsible for that. I think people have this weird thing with the internet, where they think that just because it's the internet and no one can see who they are, that means they can say what they want without any repercussions. And I think it's unacceptable. I think it's absolutely unacceptable. I think that the constant bickering and the arguments I get dragged into, it's just ridiculous. And people expect me to take their side and stuff. And this is why I made this video, because I wanted to make my opinions very, very clear to you all. I don't support either of the extreme views. I don't support the extreme view that everyone in the show is a diversity hire. At the same time, I don't support the extreme view that, you know, everyone who doesn't like this show is a bigot. You know, I don't support either view. I just don't. I just do not support either view at all. And I think that the whole constantly arguing and bickering thing is just absolutely ridiculous on both sides of the spectrum. And I think that, yeah, all of the bickering is just dumb. And I think people just need to leave each other alone. If they disagree, people just need to leave each other alone. They just need to just leave each other alone. It's not that difficult. Just stop arguing with each other. That's my opinion. I think that people just need to chill out. Series 12 is not my cup of tea either. The current era is not my cup of tea either. But moving on. We've got the merch. Now, the merch is obviously arguably one of the most profitable aspects of Doctor Who. Many people have said that it's why the BBC insists on keeping the show around, is that the merch is a very successful part of the franchise. But there's been barely any of it. We have only just, in Series 12, received a TARDIS set, a Dalek. I think we're getting companions at some point as well. We haven't even had companions yet. And I think that the failure, well, I say the failure, the lack of merchandise is, I think, indicative of the slowly declining popularity of the show. I think if the show was really popular, there would be a lot more merchandise. Simple as that. They had so much merchandise for the Russell T Davies era, like a ridiculous amount. Whereas with this era, there's been barely anything for the most part. Obviously, you've got the things like Doctor Who magazine that are always going to be around no matter what the era is. But aside from stuff like that, there's not a lot of merch that's around. And as I said, I think that is representative of the show's slow decline in popularity. The shows and the merchandise that does exist, I've seen it cluttering up shelves. No one wants it. That's the sad reality of it. And I think that when the show is failing on a merchandise level, that's the thing that hurts the BBC most. Don't get me wrong, ratings play a part as well. But I think merch hurts the BBC a lot more because it's where they make their money off of it. And I don't think it's been very successful, at least judging by some of the figures that I've seen tossed about. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that they made was waiting so long to get it out there as well. Someone says, figure-wise, why isn't there as much as the other eras, like 9 and 10 at start of 11? Well, this is the big question. I honestly think it's because the show's just not as popular anymore. I'll admit that the decline in Doctor Who merchandise didn't start with Jodie Whittaker. It started with Peter Capaldi's era. There wasn't as much merch from, I guess, Series 8 onwards, really. But that's because, like it or not, an older Doctor didn't resonate with younger audiences as much. And, like, the actual figures aren't even that good quality either. You know, I've got a weird one in the right-hand corner and a Funko Pop in the left. The Funko Pop's fine, but, like, the other stuff is just not that great. And, yeah, the merchandise has just been incredibly lackluster and therefore hasn't been selling well. And I think that is one of the biggest issues, when that's where the BBC makes its most money. But moving on, we have the ratings. Now, even though I've used a large, upward graph as the sort of picture for this segment, it's not how the ratings are actually going. There has been this constant debate within the Doctor Who community over how much ratings actually matter. Now, I'm going to be honest. Series 11's ratings were really good. The best that the show has seen for quite some time. And got people talking about the show again. There's no denying that. The announcement of a female doctor literally exploded everything. But with Series 12, I predicted a lower rating. And the reason I did was because, well, the novelty factor of it's a female doctor, it's a new showrunner, it's a new era, that would be gone. And it was. And I think the ratings are indicative of that. I would also say that the stories just weren't good enough on their own to maintain strong viewership. No one wanted to come back. Like, people got their fill with Series 11, went, okay, the show's still not for me, and switched off. And I think that we're even going to see an even bigger drop Series 13-wise, because I've seen so many fans say, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this after The Timeless Child. Admittedly, that's not everyone, but there's a good amount of people that I've seen. And the show cannot afford to be losing fans right now. See, I thought that the whole point of Series 12 going back to its roots was to kind of do a form of damage control. But by doing what they did in Timeless Children, they've kind of done the reverse of that. They've kind of created more damage. And unfortunately, it's showing in the ratings with, I think, the consolidated for the first part of the finale was still, I think, under 4 million. That's bad. So, I think Timeless Child got beaten in overnights at least by Call the Midwife and Antiques Roadshow. That's the level that we're talking about. And this was the big finale to the series. Not just a little one-off episode. The big finale that teased the return of the Time Lords, the Cybermen, and lore stuff that had been set up since the beginning of the series. The funny thing is, I actually predicted 6 million viewers for the opening episode. And I wasn't far off, to be fair. So, and I think that's just because, I think as well, what didn't help was the fact that they decided to wait a year to air the series, to make the series and obviously air it. And the reason I don't think that helped is kind of obvious. People kind of forgot that the show existed for a year, and when it came back, people were just like, oh, it's back. Okay, I guess I missed it. You know, and it obviously doesn't help that it wasn't very well marketed. It was only really marketed from what I saw on the social media pages, which would only have been followed by people who were already invested in the brand. And I think that if they really want to get the ratings back up, then they are going to have to do even more damage control for Series 13. They're going to have to retcon the Timeless Child thing, I can tell you that now. Willog's just said in the chat, put it this way, the peak of the RTD era was 10 million. That's how bad it's become. And he's right. You know, we got 10 million at Women Who Fell to Earth. Nothing has even come close to that since, you know, not even the premiere following Series 11, Spyfall, even came remotely close. I wasn't one of the people saying that the Series 11 ratings were bad. However, I am saying that the Series 12 ones ain't looking so good. And I think that, considering the Resolution special only got about 5 million with the Daleks, I think that should have been a telling sign that the show is not where it once was. And I've seen the argument commonly spouted that, 2020 viewing habits are different. It's like, yeah, they are. But explain how Call the Midwife and Antique Roadshow are doing better then. That doesn't explain how they're doing better. The simple fact of the matter is that not as many people are interested in the show anymore. That's just fact. They're not. And I just think that covering it up by saying, 2020 ratings are different, is just, you're lying to yourselves, to be honest. The ratings are not what they once were, and are not as high as they should be for one of the BBC's flagship shows. Not that they've got many left, mind you, after They showed off things like Great British Bake Off and also The Voice and things like that. So yeah, it's one of those things where they didn't have a lot left to get rid of, I suppose, and I think it's just sad that their biggest brand is struggling. I think it's sad. But moving on, the conclusion. So, what is the conclusion from all this? Why did I do this? Why did I spend an evening talking to you guys about this? Well, I love this show. I've loved this show since, well, as long as I can remember. There's Doctor Who stuff all around me right now as I'm recording this. And it just hurts to see the show in such a bad state. I know some people have said that it could improve with time, and it could improve with, you know, a new show or whatever, but by the time that comes around, you've got to think about the damage that's going to be done to the show by this point. And I'm just sad about it, really. I don't like either side of the politics argument, to be honest. I find myself, I guess, siding more with some of the ones who you could argue are on the right side for the pure fact that they actually say what's up with the ratings, which not many of the other channels do. Yeah, I don't think the bickering is necessary. I think the merchandise and the ratings are in decline. I think when you look at the Doctor Who brand as a whole, you see a brand that is dying. You see a show that's not appealing to mass audiences anymore. You see a showrunner who's basically doing his childhood fan fiction. You see a cast that are in way over their head, well, except for Bradley Walsh. You see music that's nowhere near the standard of what it once was. You see, just no identity coming from the show whatsoever. No originally unique pull. There is just nothing. And someone said, yeah, dude, Doctor Who has always been political. I agree. It has always been political. But it did it well before. There's a difference. I talk about this. There's literally a section where I talk about the politics in this, if you want to go back and look at it. Obviously, once this live stream stops, you'll be able to go back and rewind at your leisure. And I do address all these things. But to clarify, Doctor Who has always been political, but it did it well, and it tied it into sci-fi narratives that were interesting to watch. Are you doing a Q&A after this? Yes. But to close my thoughts, the cast are out of their depth. The writing is poor. The music is non-existent practically. The politics are blatant and obvious and don't say anything new. The ratings are plummeting. The merchandise is plummeting. The brand is dying. And it's sad. Will I review Series 13? Who knows? I don't really want to. But who knows? I also know that you guys would probably like to hear my thoughts about it. There's 71 of you watching right now, which honestly blows my mind. I didn't expect this many of you here. But yeah, thank you all. And now we come to the segment of the live stream, which is where I get you guys more involved. The Q&A. Now this is basically where you can ask any questions that you had during my sort of ramblings, if you want. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed that. It's something I've wanted to get off my chest for a while. But yeah, any questions you want to ask, feel free. I'm just looking through the chat here. At least Colin Baker here had more memorable, was more memorable, and Colin had more charisma. Agreed. He was a good actor who could carry a ship. I think it'll still be Doctor Who, but not as much as it used to be. It is, to me, I always struggle with the idea that this isn't Doctor Who. I just think that it's just a dying Doctor Who, I guess. What is your favourite colour? Blue, obviously. Dark blue, specifically. I don't really know all the different sort of shades of blue, so sorry if I'm not specific, but yeah. I think I'll still follow Doctor Who, but not as much as I used to. Doctor Who can never die. It just needs a rest. Yeah, potentially. That could also work. Someone said Tharis for showrunner. Tharis, do you think a male Doctor would bring back some of the mad fans? Honestly, no. I don't think the idea of a female Doctor was the issue with Series 11. Think about it. If Series 11 had cast a male Doctor, would that have made Series 11 any better? Because I don't think it would have. Someone said, okay, with the recent departure of Graham and Ryan, do you think Doctor and Yaz dynamic will go? How do you think the Doctor and Yaz dynamic will go? I honestly don't think that they can carry a series on their own either. Bradley Walsh was one of the few things that I think kept this show going, and without him, I think it's going to be a struggle. What's your favourite William Hartnell story? That would be Dalek Invasion of Earth. We need a Dalek Nider, a grumpy. I don't know what that means. I'm guessing Nider as in the Genesis of the Daleks character? Darius, do you think if we get Jo Martin instead of Jodie, the reception of a female Doctor would be much more positive in general? I personally prefer her over Jodie. I would agree. I would say that I think that if they'd have gone with her from the get-go, the idea of a female Doctor would have been a lot more positive. Will you continue to watch Series 13 or will you stop until Chibnall leaves? I'm not sure at this current point. I will watch the Series 12 special because my source predicted that. However, whether I'll watch Series 13, I don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't. I don't really want to, but at the same time, I enjoy making content about this show. So, maybe. I don't know. I'm gonna have to see how I feel when it inevitably rears its ugly head. Why is the Timeless Child stealing its TARDIS? Who knows? Did you like the fan art I made on the community tab? And do you think Taika Waititi would take on the role? What, as Doctor? No. Not a showrunner either, to be honest. Most important question. Most important answer. Just stick a fork in it. Chibnall has destroyed its beyond recovery. I'm not sure it's beyond recovery. I think I might agree with the problem being that it just needs a rest. A long rest. Don't get me wrong, a long rest, but a rest nonetheless. That almost rhymed. I'm a poet and I didn't know it. Least favourite classic Who story, Invasion of Time. Do you think Chibnall will have one more season and there will be either a short hiatus or reboot with different Doctor and showrunner? I think at least Whittaker will have one more series. I don't know about Chibnall. Here's the thing about Whittaker though. Channel Pup, I was talking to Channel Pup Will Grantham about this, and he brought up a very good point, is that unless Whittaker is forced out of the role, Jodie's going to want to keep clinging on to it for as long as possible. Because he said, after this, I doubt Jodie's going to get much work, so she's going to want to cling on to this for as long as possible. So we could be seeing, she could have the longest tenure of any Doctor, which is a very scary thought, don't get me wrong. However, obviously it's not, I'm not saying that's confirmed or anything, but it would make sense considering that she's never had a role of this scale before. She's never had, I don't think, a paycheck this big before. So of course she's not going to want to give it up, but I can't imagine her staying much further beyond 3 series if, you know, the BBC had anything to do with it, because let's face facts. Stuff with her on the cover isn't selling. If they give him free reign, yeah, Force Dalek. What was that in reference to? I mean, Taika Waititi, I don't think the money would be in it for him, to be honest. Tharis, as a fan who happens to be Muslim, I was excited for a Muslim companion, but Yaz felt completely wasted, especially compared to a non-companion like Rita from God Complex. Agreed. If they stopped and had a movie in a few years, history will kind of have to repeat itself. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it did repeat itself. Chips has split the fandom for sure. While I have enjoyed the writing in Broadchurch, I see he's trying to do it with Doctor Who. But he needs to realise Doctor Who cannot work the way Broadchurch does. Agreed. The disrespect to Hartnell in the Timeless Child episode is the worst thing to come out of an episode. I agree. Not just that, the disrespect to the entire canon. Not even just that William Hartnell he is, but like everything. My mother's parents survived Auschwitz whilst many of their relatives didn't. So bear that in mind when you call me a fascist. Okay, I'm going to leave that. Do you think the BBC will let Sir Peter Jackson be a showrunner? No. Least favourite classic Q story, I already answered that one. Chibnall fulfilled his Cardinal Master. Chibnall fulfilled his plan, Cardinal didn't, that's the only difference. Yeah, but I'd have preferred the Cardinal Master Plan over what Chibnall came up with. Who do you want the showrunner if it was series 13? Probably Toby Whithouse. Who's your favourite master? Actually, I'm not going to answer that here because I'm planning on doing a ranking of them all. So stay tuned for that. Oh my god, we got a €5, I think that's euro, super chat from Michael Mahoon. I can't bring myself to watch this anymore. Thanks for keeping me updated. Not at all, man. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate that. Wow. Really generous. Let me scroll back up because it's automatically scrolled me down. But yeah, Toby Whithouse. His name is not Channel Pup. It's the Absorbaloff kid. Yeah, that's true. I think he's a very corrupt politician. But doesn't... Okay, I'm going to skip anything to do with fascism. Okay. Darius, what's your opinion on the new black Dalek design? Personally, I think it looks pretty naff. I didn't like the reconnaissance Dalek design, and it's kind of sort of like that. Honestly, I think I'd have preferred the reconnaissance Dalek. It's the weird bump in the middle that really doesn't appeal to me. Like, I kind of like the colour scheme, I'll say that. Yeah, I kind of like the colour scheme, but I don't really dig any other part of it, other than the colour scheme. So, yeah, it's not a fan of it at all. Apologies again if you can hear any sort of rustling in the background, I do apologise. It's very difficult with it live, it's very difficult to sort of blur it out. Yeah, I agree. I think I prefer the actual reconnaissance design. Darius, mate, you better say I'm your favourite master. Pacifist, you did do a great job in Regenerated. About Mitch, I don't like this era, but I do want a Bradley Walsh. Yeah, it does look like Stephen Mulhern though, from what I've seen. Oops, it's scrolled back up again. I hate when it does that. I just wish Chibs would give Jodie better writing, because I know it's not her fault. People hate her. People hate her just because, just like they hated Colin Baker. To an extent, I do think it's her fault. I think she does have her part to play, because I don't think she's strong enough for the role, but I do think it is mostly Chris Chibnall. Let me just have a scroll down 1 second. Okay, what is the other thing here? Do 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 do. I'm gonna have to go now. Have fun. Thanks, Cynical Who. Alright, well I guess that wraps up the Q&A section. Thank you all very much for watching this. It's as I say, I kind of just wanted to get all my opinions out there. Be sure to like this video. There's 67 of you watching right now. Let's see if we can get all of you to like this video in one go. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Like the video. Yeah, it's not changing yet. I don't know why. Maybe it's lagging. But yeah. Be sure to like the video. Obviously, as soon as it's been processed by YouTube, you'll be live, so you can watch it at your leisure. I'm probably going to do something like this more regularly. Not so much to this scale, but like, I think once a week would be a really cool thing to do, just to like tell you some of my thoughts live on things. But yeah, let me know if you want that. Be sure to like this. Subscribe if you want more of this sort of stuff. Comment down below if you want to further discuss anything that we talked about. Sorry, my words are all a bit muffled. Again, so apologies if you heard any rustling or ruffling in the background. It's, as I said, it's very difficult to cancel out. And obviously, because we're moving, everyone's sort of everywhere at the moment. So apologies for that. Thank you all for watching. And I will see you if I can find a way to get the stream off. Alright, and I will see you soon. End stream. Bye, everyone. It won't end. Alright, there we go.